In the heart of Chicago's West Englewood, a trusted landlord vanished without a trace. The search for answers would uncover a tale of deception, greed, and a gruesome betrayal by those he sought to help. A routine complaint about a leak took a dark and unexpected turn. What started as a landlord addressing an issue ended in a brutal murder, and a body dumped in a sewer. What led to this horrifying crime? What really happened inside that apartment? And why did these brothers go to such gruesome lengths to cover their tracks? Kethareddy was a hard-working and responsible landlord who took pride in maintaining his properties and ensuring his tenants had a safe place to live. He was known for his dedication, always willing to personally inspect and address any maintenance issues. When he received a complaint about a leak from two of his tenants, brothers Elijah and Tony Green, he didn't hesitate to respond. To those who knew him, Kethareddy was a kind and diligent man, someone who treated his tenants fairly and had no known conflicts. He had no reason to suspect that this visit would be any different from his previous routine inspections. But on that fateful day, he unknowingly walked into a carefully orchestrated trap. What began as a simple mission to fix a leak quickly turned into a horrifying nightmare, one that would cost him his life. Brothers Elijah, 25, and Tony Green, 22, tenants of Kethareddy, faced financial difficulties and owed back rent. Instead of seeking assistance, they devised a sinister plan to eliminate their landlord and erase their debts. Elijah Green and Tony Green were brothers who had lived in the apartment building owned by Kethareddy. To outsiders, they may have seemed like ordinary tenants, but beneath the surface, their intentions were far more sinister. Whether their grievances with their landlord were genuine or merely a pretext for a more nefarious plan remains unclear. However, what is certain is that they carefully plotted to lure Kethareddy into their apartment under the guise of a maintenance issue. Elijah and Tony's backgrounds revealed a troubled past, with indications of financial struggles and possibly a history of disputes. Whether driven by desperation, resentment, or something even darker, the brothers made a chilling decision: to turn their landlord's goodwill into an opportunity for murder. As they waited for Kethareddy to arrive, they had already set their plan in motion. What should have been a routine visit to inspect a simple leak would soon escalate into a brutal crime that shocked the community. The brothers were not just tenants in need of assistance. They were executioners waiting for their unsuspecting victim. On August 4, 2018, Kethareddy arrived at the apartment, unaware of the deadly trap set by Elijah and Tony Green. He had come with the intention of addressing their complaints about a leak, fulfilling his responsibilities as a landlord. However, the moment he stepped inside, the situation took a horrifying turn. The attack was swift and brutal. The brothers overpowered Kethareddy, turning what should have been a routine maintenance check into a gruesome assault. Whether he fought back or pleaded for his life remains uncertain, but what is known is that he never made it out of the apartment alive. After murdering him, Elijah and Tony faced a grim decision: how to dispose of the body. Rather than risk discovery, they carried out a shocking and calculated act. They concealed Kethareddy's remains and ultimately disposed him in the sewer, an act of cruelty that not only aimed to erase the evidence but also demonstrated their cold-blooded nature. What could have driven them to commit such a horrific crime? Was it a planned act of violence fueled by resentment, or did a confrontation spiral out of control? Whatever their motives, their actions turned an ordinary apartment into a crime scene and left an entire community in shock. The disappearance of Kethareddy did not go unnoticed. When he failed to return home or respond to calls, concern quickly grew among his family and friends. Known for his reliability and commitment to his tenants, it was unlike him to simply vanish without explanation. As worry turned into alarm, authorities were notified, and an official missing person investigation was launched. Investigators began their search by retracing Kethareddy's last known whereabouts. Through phone records and witness testimonies, they discovered that he had scheduled a visit to the apartment occupied by Elijah and Tony Green on the day he disappeared. This critical lead directed police straight to the brothers' residence, making them the last people known to have seen Kethareddy alive. When authorities questioned Elijah and Tony, their responses raised immediate red flags. Their accounts of Kethareddy's visit were vague and inconsistent, with each brother offering different versions of events. They claimed he had left after a brief discussion, but there was no evidence to support this. Investigators also noted the brothers' nervous demeanor, fueling suspicions that they were hiding something. Hoping to confirm or disprove the brothers' statements, investigators turned to surveillance footage from nearby buildings and traffic cameras. Their efforts paid off. Video evidence contradicted the Green brothers' claims. Footage showed Kethoretti entering the apartment but never leaving. The lack of any recorded exit suggested foul play and reinforced the likelihood that something terrible had happened inside. Further analysis of the brothers' digital activity uncovered even more damning evidence. In the days following Kethoretti's disappearance, they had searched online for ways to dispose of a body, crime scene cleanup tips, and legal consequences for homicide. These chilling searches painted a picture of premeditation and an attempt to cover their tracks. As suspicion mounted, authorities intensified their efforts to locate Kethoretti's body. A breakthrough came when they discovered inconsistencies in the sewer system near the apartment complex. Acting on a hunch, investigators conducted a detailed search, and what they found was horrifying. The remains of Kethoretti had been dumped in the sewer. The discovery not only confirmed the worst fears but also provided undeniable evidence of murder. Forensic experts worked to recover and analyze the body, determining the cause of death and gathering crucial physical evidence to link the crime to the Green brothers. Investigators gathered biological evidence from both the crime scene and Kethoretti's remains. DNA analysis confirmed the presence of the victim's blood inside the apartment, despite the brothers' attempts to clean it up. Additionally, fibers and fingerprints found on Kethoretti's clothing matched Elijah and Tony, further cementing their involvement. With overwhelming evidence in hand, law enforcement had enough to make their move. Arrest warrants were issued, and Elijah and Tony Green were taken into custody. The brothers, once thought to be just disgruntled tenants, were now prime suspects in a calculated and brutal murder. The investigation had uncovered a grim reality. What began as a routine landlord-tenant interaction had escalated into a cold-blooded killing. But with the suspects behind bars, the case was far from over. The next step would take place in the courtroom, where the full weight of justice would be brought against them. With Elijah and Tony Green in custody, the case against them moved swiftly into the legal system. Prosecutors were determined to ensure justice for Kethoretti, while the defense sought to challenge the evidence and possibly secure a lesser sentence for the accused. Elijah and Tony were formally charged with first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence.
Two brothers will spend more than 40 years behind bars for killing their landlord and hiding his body in a sewer on Chicago's South Side in 2018. Elijah and Tony Green were convicted of first-degree murder last August for killing Vasudevareddy Kethoretti. The 76-year-old had been missing for nearly 2 months before his body was found in Englewood.
Given the brutality of the crime and the calculated manner in which it was carried out, prosecutors made it clear they would seek the maximum penalty. During their initial court appearance, the Green brothers showed little emotion as the charges were read. The judge denied them bail, citing the overwhelming evidence against them and the risk that they could flee if released. The prosecution presented a strong case, built upon a combination of forensic evidence, digital records, and eyewitness testimony. Their goal was to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the brothers had not only planned the attack but had also gone to great lengths to cover it up. Surveillance footage, video evidence from security cameras showed Kethoretti entering the Green brothers' apartment but never leaving, contradicting their initial claims. DNA and forensic evidence, blood splatters found in the apartment matched Kethoretti, despite an apparent attempt to clean the crime scene. Internet search history. The prosecution introduced damning evidence that Elijah and Tony had searched for terms related to body disposal, crime scene cleanup, and forensic detection methods in the days leading up to and following the murder. Witness testimonies, neighbors, and other tenants recalled hearing suspicious noises coming from the Green brothers' apartment on the night of the crime. Some also testified that the brothers had frequently argued with Kethoretti about rent and maintenance issues. With all this evidence, the prosecution painted a picture of premeditation and intent, arguing that the Green brothers had lured Kethoretti to the apartment under false pretenses before attacking him. The Green brothers' defense attorneys attempted to cast doubt on the prosecution's version of events. They argued that there was no premeditation, the defense claimed that while Ketheredi's death was tragic, it was not premeditated murder. Instead, they argued that a heated confrontation escalated unexpectedly, leading to an accidental killing. Self-defense. In a last-ditch effort, the defense suggested that Ketheredi may have become aggressive first, forcing the brothers to act in self-defense. However, this argument was weak, as no evidence supported the claim that the victim was violent. One brother acted alone. At one point, the defense suggested that only one of the brothers was responsible for the actual killing, while the other had merely helped cover it up out of fear. This was an attempt to lessen the charges for at least one of them. Despite these arguments, the jury remained unconvinced, as the forensic evidence and digital footprint overwhelmingly indicated that both brothers had actively participated in the murder and disposal of Ketheredi's body. After weeks of testimony and evidence presentation, the case was handed over to the jury for deliberation. Given the overwhelming amount of evidence, the decision did not take long. The jury found both Elijah and Tony Green guilty of first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence. The verdict sent shockwaves through the courtroom, as the two brothers showed little emotion when their fate was sealed. Following the guilty verdict, the sentencing phase began. Prosecutors pushed for the harshest possible sentence, arguing that the cold and calculated nature of the crime warranted life in prison without parole. During sentencing, Ketheredi's family gave emotional impact statements, describing the devastating loss they had suffered. They spoke about how he was a kind and hardworking man who had been taken from them in the most senseless and horrific way. In contrast, Elijah and Tony remained largely emotionless, only offering brief statements of regret, which the judge and victims' family members found insincere. Ultimately, both brothers were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring they would never be free again. The judge condemned their actions as cruel and premeditated, emphasizing that their attempt to cover up the murder demonstrated a complete disregard for human life. With the trial concluded and justice served, the community reflected on the case with a mix of relief and sorrow. Ketheredi's family found some closure, knowing that his killers had been held accountable. However, the tragic circumstances of his death remained a painful memory for all who knew him. As for the Green brothers, their names became synonymous with betrayal and cruelty, an example of how greed and violence can destroy lives. Locked away in a maximum security prison, they would spend the rest of their days reflecting on the choices that led them to their fate. The legal battle was over, but the impact of the crime would linger for years to come. The case of Elijah and Tony Green stands as a stark reminder of how greed, resentment, and violence can lead to unimaginable tragedy. What should have been a simple discussion between a landlord and his tenants turned into a calculated act of murder, shocking an entire community and leaving a family grieving for their loved one. With the guilty verdict and life sentences handed down, the legal system ensured that Ketheredi's killers would never walk free again. However, no amount of legal justice could undo the pain and loss felt by Ketheredi's family and friends. A hardworking man, dedicated to his tenants and his livelihood, had his life taken in the most brutal way, simply for trying to resolve a maintenance issue. For the Green brothers, their actions sealed their fate. Their once promising futures were now reduced to life behind bars, a tragic consequence of their violent decisions. Their lack of remorse throughout the trial only further cemented the idea that they saw Ketheredi not as a person, but as an obstacle to be removed. The murder sent shockwaves through the local community. Neighbors and fellow tenants who had once interacted with both the victim and the perpetrators were left stunned by the brutality of the crime. Many struggled to comprehend how a simple landlord-tenant dispute escalated into a horrific act of violence. In the wake of the case, discussions about tenant-landlord relationships, conflict resolution, and personal safety became more urgent. People reflected on the warning signs, past disputes, tensions, and possible red flags that had gone unnoticed. Could anything have been done to prevent this? This case serves as a chilling cautionary tale. It highlights the dangers of unchecked anger and resentment, showing how easily a conflict can spiral out of control when people resort to violence instead of rational solutions. It also raises important discussions about recognizing toxic behavior, The Green brothers' willingness to deceive and their extreme response to a minor issue revealed deep-seated anger issues that could have been warning signs. Handling disputes peacefully, had proper mediation been sought, this situation could have been resolved without bloodshed. Seeking help when tensions rise, friends, neighbors, and family members might have noticed the growing hostility. Intervening or seeking outside help could have potentially de-escalated the conflict. While the case is legally closed, the memory of Kethoretti's tragic fate will never be forgotten. His family and friends must now carry on without him, forced to relive the pain each time they remember how his life was taken so cruelly. For Elijah and Tony Green, their choices led them to a lifetime of regret behind prison walls. Their actions serve as a dark lesson on how impulsive decisions and violent tendencies can ruin not just one life, but many. In the end, this case reminds us all of the value of human life, the importance of conflict resolution, and the irreversible consequences of violent actions. It is a story of loss, justice, and a tragedy that should never have happened.